Again, good afternoon, Dr. Joy and classmates. I'm going to tell a story today that I sincerely hope you'll enjoy. I think that some of the funniest stories are true life stories, and some of the lessons that we learn are those lessons that we learn in making fun of ourselves. So I'm going to take you back into the 70s when I was very active with the rescue squad, back in the days when there was not a great deal of training that was involved. In fact, the emergency medical technician classes had just started. They were being taught by doctors, and it was very hard to get the doctors to come to class and get the necessary hours that were involved. So I was fortunate enough to be a member of the Wythe County Rescue Squad and had completed my EMT and was feeling very good about things, and was running a number of emergency calls. On this particular night, we had had an accident that had occurred just outside of Wythe County. An individual had stepped in front of a car and been hit on the 4-lane highway, which was the predecessor to Interstate 77. During that time, we didn't have a great deal of equipment, and as I said, not a great deal of training. And one of the other things that we were lacking was a paging system. So emergency calls were basically done by a telephone tree. And it just so happened that I had agreed to answer calls on this particular evening, and my partner gave me a call, advising me of the situation. So I jumped out of my waterbed, which was one of the popular things at that period of time. I'll never forget that I jumped up so fast that the water was swishing back and forth and my wife was almost thrown out of the bed. Grabbed my gear that I kept beside the bed and ran out the door wondering just what was going to be facing me as I got into this particular situation. Jumped into the car and went to the appointed position to wait for my partner to pick me up in the ambulance. And I remember very clearly the fact that it was a very warm August night. The skies were clear, the stars were out, there was just the softest bit of a breeze, and the moon was full. And in the dark, I could hear the siren coming from the truck and eventually could see the lights. And of course, my partner was there. So I climbed in the truck and we headed on towards the scene of the accident. The red lights kind of made an eerie reflection as they bounced off of the different signs, and we kind of quietly discussed about what we might be facing, what kind of situation would be there when we got there, and how serious injuries of this nature were, and we kind of ran through in our heads what types of things we might need to do and what types of equipment we might need. As we got nearer to the scene, even though it was late at night, traffic was stopped, and it took us some time to get up to the incident itself. Once we got there, we could see a lot of different red lights, a lot of people standing around. Virginia State Police were there, and there was obviously an individual in the middle of the road. We stopped the truck, opened the door, turned on the right-hand lights. I immediately jumped out with my stethoscope and my rubber gloves and went to check on the patient to see what kind of condition he was in. He was laying on the ground covered by a blanket which had been obtained from somewhere, and I started out by trying to determine the level of consciousness of this man. And I asked him if he knew where he was, and he said yes. And I asked him if he knew his name, who the president was, and when his birthday was, and he responded appropriately to all these questions, which was a little bit unusual for an individual who should have been in excruciating pain and who had just suffered a major traumatic situation. I asked him if he was hurting anywhere, and he said just a little bit on his side. But looking down at his body, I saw that his left leg was angulated almost 45 degrees. This immediately gave me some concern, because an injury of that nature should be painful. And if it wasn't, then that meant that there was a possibility that there was nerve involvement, and we might even have to go so far as to try to straighten his leg to restore what could be lost circulation in his leg. I gently felt his leg starting from the thigh down, asking him if it hurt. He continued to say no, it didn't. I felt on down to his knee, as far as his knee, and he still said that it didn't hurt. I asked him if he could wiggle his toes, and he said no. At this point, I turned to my partner and I said, Raymond, you need to get a backboard, get us a splint. We're probably going to have to straighten this extremity because I believe this man's lost circulation. You get that stuff together and I'll continue to examine him and see just exactly what we need to do. One of the passersby said, do you really think that's necessary? And I said, well, yeah, this could be a very serious injury. He could actually lose a leg. We've got to get this done very quickly. At which point, the state trooper leaned down to me and said, Charlie, you can kind of slow down on your evaluation right here. He said, this guy's got a wooden leg. Moral of that story is, things aren't always what they seem. Have a nice evening.